administrators. There we go, we're being recorded. Okay, so if you're not an administrator, maybe you're a teacher and you've come on here because you have your own questions about credentials or want to understand more, or maybe you're a counselor and you're wanting to understand, or support staff. Whatever your role is though, definitely if you are an administrator, it's really important that you understand CTE credentials because you have to ensure that each CTE course that is taught is with a qualified instructor as outlined by California law. Now, essential element number 6 of quality CTE programs, as Ann talked about, are having the correct instructors for the correct pathway and a sufficient pool of instructors for your program. And the way you get there is by knowing the requirements and being able to hire qualified people. So recruitment hiring is the number 1, program oversight is the other 2, and fiscal is the 3rd. You have to determine if a potential teacher is qualified to teach a certain subject within a certain pathway. You also need to be clear about what's necessary in order to qualify for that credential. And then you also need to help them once they get their preliminary credential to meet the requirements to clear their credential so that you can keep them on your staff. And for fiscal integrity, you need to be sure that the teacher holds the proper credential so that you can spend CTE incentive grant monies or Perkins monies on that teacher's program. And CTE is pretty specific about what type of CTE credential will match what type of program to allow you to spend those grant funds. Also, we know that one of the measures on the California School Dashboard is the completion of career pathways by students with a qualified CTE teacher. So let's take a look at the CTE teacher credentialing options and requirements, starting with the designated subject CTE credential. So what is a designated subject's CTE credential? This credential allows teachers to teach at a middle school level, high school level, in charter school, adult school, ROCP, or other type of training school with adults. The preliminary credential is issued for 3 years. They must meet the requirements then to clear their credential before it expires within that 3 years. We'll be going over that. The preliminary credential has subject authorizations that are based on industry work experience and background. May also include college courses that they've taken to qualify them, but it will specify what subject authorization is on that CTE credential, and they may have more than one. Well, those subject authorizations are actually what we call the CTE industry sectors, of which there are 15. So here they are. These are the 15 industry sectors. And if you work in CTE, you probably know these 15 sectors extremely well. These are the sectors that the California Department of Ed have determined and built the California model curriculum standards on, and also the particular pathways within each of those industry sectors. But as far as when a CTE credential is issued, it will specify an industry sector. It will not specify pathways or subjects within the sector. So let me talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so teachers are only allowed to teach those subjects for which they qualified when they received their credential. Now, this is an important distinction because an industry sector can be very broad and it may include a lot of occupations, but whatever industry or occupational experience that teacher had, and maybe college courses, industry certifications and so forth, that's what got them that particular industry sector. But that doesn't mean that they can teach everything within that industry sector because they don't have the background, perhaps. So let me give you some examples of this, because this is a real point of confusion I found. Let's say you were given fashion and interior design as the industry sector on your credential. Well, that was based upon you submitting documentation of work experience. And there are a variety of subjects that fall under fashion and interior design. And let's say, for instance, your work experience was in cosmetology. Let's say you were a hairdresser. That's your background. And based on that, that's how you got fashion and interior design as the subject on your credential, or in the sector on your credential. Well, here's the problem. Fashion and interior design covers cosmetology, fashion merchandising, upholstering, interior design, and more. So if you got it based on cosmetology experience, that's the subject that you can teach, not those others that are within that sector, unless you happen to have work experience in those. Maybe you were a cosmetologist and maybe you also had work experience as an upholsterer. Not likely, but you never know. It's the responsibility of the employer, it's going to be the school district or the school, to determine what your background is and which CTE subjects you can teach within that industry sector. Now, sometimes people in HR are not familiar with that. They're just looking for a CTE credential. So it's up to the CTE administrator to know this and to find out what kind of background the individual has and whether they are qualified to teach the subject you want them to teach. Now, you should be aware also that some subjects are listed under different industry sectors. So it can get tricky. For example, you'll find that the Commission on Teacher Credentialing has placed robotics under 3 different industry sectors. It's under engineering and architecture, it's under information communication technology, it's also under manufacturing and product development. It's in 3 different places. So the determination of which industry sector to put on that individual's credential will come from LACO, and that'll be based on what type of work experience has been documented. Is it robotics related to engineering and architecture? Is it robotics related to information and communication technology? Or is it robotics under manufacturing and product development? So we'll be looking at that work experience to see where it should fall. Now, the problem is maybe you're going to offer robotics under a particular pathway. So we may end up giving that teacher a credential for a different sector than you were planning on. So it's really important to communicate with us if you're planning to hire somebody, what you're hoping that they're going to be able to teach, what pathway it's under, what sectors it's under. And, you know, if their work experience doesn't fit, then we'll turn around and say, what other work experience do you have? Let's see if we can make it fit here instead of here. We will work with you as much as we can on that. So one last warning, the subjects that CTC came up with in the occupations are not fully aligned with the CTE model curriculum standards. So you got to watch for that too. Example, animation. CTC has animation listed under manufacturing and product development because animator is an occupation that they see falling under that sector. The California Department of Ed has animation under arts, media, and entertainment. And so most districts, when they set up a program with a pathway, they're going to set it up under arts, media, and entertainment. The problem is the only thing that CTC recognizes under arts, media, and entertainment that's close to animation is what they call multimedia productions. So they're asking us to look for work experience in multimedia productions. They're not looking for the type of animator experience that's found under manufacturing and product development. So, you know, truly the devil is in the details. And again, it's important to communicate with our coordinator, Linda Matzik, to let us know what is it that you're looking for? How do you plan to offer your pathway or to replace a previous teacher? And hopefully we can get this person credentialed for you if they have the right kind of work experience. Okay, so how to qualify for a preliminary CTE credential? Well, there's 3 ways to kind of go about it. And the easy way is option 1. If the individual is coming out of industry, if they've had 3 years of related work experience. Now, CTC defines a year as 1,000 hours per year that can be paid or unpaid experience. It can actually be volunteer experience. So that's 3,000 hours of work experience that we're looking for. So let's say you want someone to teach a banking occupations class. We're going to look for 3,000 hours, at least 1,000 hours per year for 3 years for someone who has worked, say, as a bank teller or some other job in the banking industry. If they have less than 1,000 in 1 year, they can accumulate it across multiple years. So instead of 3 years, if they only had 500 a year, if they had 6 years, then that went out up to the 3,000. So that's option 1. Option 2 is if the individual has only had 2 years of industry experience, 2,000 hours, but they took college courses, what we call post-secondary vocational training or college level CTE courses. And so what we would need to make up that 3rd year is 24 semester units in the subject. So we'd be looking for, business, finance, marketing, those kinds of classes to qualify them. General ed courses do not count. So we'd be looking at their transcripts. The other thing is an industry certification. An industry certification can count as 1 year. So that's the other way to get to that 3 years. And then third is if the individual only has 1 year of industry experience, only 1,000 hours, but they have 48 semester units in the subject, or they have 24 semester units plus the industry certification. So that will get them to those 3 years. The other thing you need to know is CTC requires that this work experience be recent. This is what they call the recency requirement. The recency requirement is to make sure that the industry experience is up to date. They don't want someone who worked in the industry 40 years ago, like me. I was in business back in the 70s, right? When I got my credentials. Yeah, that's not too recent. So what they're looking for is at least 1 year of the work experience falling within the last 5 years or 2 years within the last 10 years. So they're looking at 1,000 hours within the last 5 years or 2,000 hours within the last 10 years. That's how CTC defines it. And this is a stumbling block sometimes for individuals who want to teach because their work experience might be old. So the other way we get around that is we look at what have they done recently then? If their work experience is older than 10 years, what have they done recently related to the industry? And that's where we can take an occupational internship, we can take post-secondary vocational training, we can take an industry certification to take care of that recency issue. And then the other thing is if they've been teaching, and that's why their work experience is old because they've been a teacher, then we can count that in lieu of 1 year of the work experience. So that's how we work with that recency issue. Okay, so once they get their preliminary credential, what happens? Well, they can start teaching whenever you're ready to start them. Once they get that prelim credential, they can start. It's not a temporary credential. It's not a sub-credential. It's a regular credential. We just call it preliminary because it's only good for 3 years. So now what do they have to do? They've got 3 years to finish their requirements and then they can clear their credential.
Dr. Wagner, if you'll excuse me for just a moment, just to let you know, we have probably less than a minute in the room.
Whoa. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just flip these through for you. They have to do early orientation. They have 4 or 5 courses they have to take through us. They have to then teach a CTE course for 2 years. They have to be supervised. They have to have a mentor assigned to them. They have to meet the US Constitution and CPR requirement, and then apply for a clear credential. Okay, my last thing is, if you have single subject teachers who have a career technical subject, such as the 5 listed here, they can teach CTE. They don't have to apply for a designated subjects credential. You can email me and I can tell you more about that. And then lastly, if you have a teacher with a single subject credential in an academic subject, not CTE, it's not too difficult for them to qualify as long as they have a year of industry experience, 24 semester units in the subject, and they've taught full-time any subject for at least a year, and we can work with them and get them qualified. That takes me to questions, and I'll take a peek at the chat room, even though I think we're out of time. And here's my email, most importantly, wagner_nancy@laco.edu. You can email me anytime and get into specific questions about any individual that you need to. And I only have one question in the chat, thankfully. So let's see. I think we're good. I don't see anything for me. So I think we're good, and we'll go ahead and leave our breakout room, right, Gina? All right. Thank you, everybody. Feel free to email me anytime.
Thank you.
The same topic. We just wanted to make sure you had 2 out of 3 opportunities to be in the different rooms. So as we recreate them, we will now transfer you into our next rooms. So in the chat, we have put in the information, and you'll see here the slide to remind you what the topic is in each room. So I see Catherine Rial, number 2. Thank you. Give us a second and I'll start moving them around.
Irina?
Yes.
How much time? Because I was kind of monitoring that time, and
The next one, our next one is from 2:15, but we obviously there's going to be a little changing time there to 2:15.
they're 25 minutes each.
25 minutes, so it'd be 2:40.
The last one was
15
was not.
minutes.
It was
Yeah.
it was very short.
Yeah, it was 15 minutes. Okay.
Hello, everybody. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And can you see my PowerPoint?
Not yet.
Okay.
Is this the same meeting as the one that was earlier? Because I got thrown into the same one, I think.
Yes, it's exactly the same. Well, you're welcome to leave if you'd like. It's going to be a repeat. Okay, can you see my PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, I'll go to full screen. Are we good? All
Yep.
right.
That's full.
So welcome, everybody.
Hello?
Thanks for, can you hear me? Yes?
Yes.
All right. Welcome to the breakout session on CTE teacher credentialing. My name is Nancy Wagner. I recognize some of your names. I think I maybe have met you before. We've emailed. For those of you who don't know me, I worked for LACO for many, many years, and I began the credential program back in 1991. So I know a bit about CTE credentials. I now work as a contract consultant helping Linda Matzik in credentials. So first, some housekeeping. Since there are a number of people in the breakout, you might want to change to speaker view instead of gallery view. And also make sure you stay muted throughout the PowerPoint. As we get toward the end, if you want to post something in the chat room, I'm going to take a look at the questions in the chat room at the very end. And if you do post a question, make it general, not specific. Specific questions are best emailed to me so we can get into details about an individual's qualifications for credentials. So let's start by, why do you need to understand CTE credentials? Well, essential element number 6 of quality CTE programs are the skills of its instructors and a sufficient pool of instructors for your CTE pathway courses. So it's the role of the individual administrator to ensure that each CTE course is taught by a qualified instructor as outlined by California regulations. Now, the reasons are threefold: recruitment, hiring, program oversight, and fiscal. You need to determine if a potential teacher is qualified for a specific pathway and subject. You also need to make sure you've got a good match between the pathway and the teacher's credential. And you also have to assist that teacher once they get their preliminary credential with getting their credential cleared within 3 years so you can hang on to them. Now, for fiscal integrity, you need to make sure that the teacher holds the appropriate credential for what you are putting into CalPads, and also so that you can expend CTE incentive grant monies or Perkins monies on that teacher's program. Also, we know that one of the measures on the California School Dashboard is the completion of career pathways with qualified CTE instructors. So let's take a look at some of your CTE teacher credentialing options. Now, what is a preliminary designated subject CTE credential? Well, this credential can be used to teach middle school, high school, charter schools, adult schools, ROCPs, or other training schools. The preliminary credential is issued for 3 years. By the end of those 3 years, they have to have met the qualifications in order to clear their credential if they want to keep teaching. The credential subject authorization is based on industry work experience and background. It's a career technical education based on the work they've done employed in a certain industry. Now, on the credential, what you see are what they call subject authorizations. There might be one or there may be multiples for career tech ed. Those are the 15 industry sectors that those of us in CTE know and love. So when you get a credential, it will have one or more industry sectors. It won't have specific subjects. It will have the broad sector. And here they are. These are the 15 industry sectors, which I'm sure look really familiar to all of you. Our credential application includes a list of the sectors, the pathways that come within those, and then also a list of the occupations that CTC has determined should fall within that sector. And that's really important when you're looking at what type of work experience do they need to have. Okay, so what CTE subjects may be taught with that credential? Well, teachers can only teach whatever they are qualified to teach based on their background. So you can have a sector listed, but that doesn't mean they can teach everything in that industry sector necessarily. Let me give you an example. Fashion interior design is a big industry sector. It covers a lot of occupations ranging from cosmetology to fashion merchandising, interior design, and even upholstery. So when someone applies for a credential, we're looking at their work experience. And let's say, for instance, their work experience is in cosmetology. Maybe they were a hairdresser, and we were able to qualify them for the credential based on their cosmetology experience. Well, you know what? Even though their credential says fashion interior design, you can't have them teach upholstery because that's not their background. That's not what they got the credential based on their background. Now, if they happen to have also been an upholsterer, then that's different. That would be really unusual, right? So the responsibility for determining which subjects can be taught by the teacher falls to the employer, the district, the school. That's why, in addition to the credential itself, you've got to look at their resume. You may have to look at transcripts. You need to see, well, what is their background? How did they get fashion and interior design on their credential? Why? And then you'll know what subjects they can teach. Now, you need to know that some CTE subjects fall into different industry sectors. This can make it really confusing. And sometimes people in your HR departments may not know this distinction. So it's important for the CTE administrator to let them know what subject, what career pathway, and therefore what industry sector are we looking for when someone applies for this job. So let me give you an example. Robotics is a good example. CTC has robotics as an occupation under 3 different sectors: engineering and architecture, information communication technology, and manufacturing and product development. 3 different industry sectors. So how do we determine which one to put on that credential? Well, we look at their background. We're looking at what type of robotics experience do they have, and that will determine which industry sector they will get on their credential. So it's important for you as the administrator to communicate with us if you're planning to hire someone. What are you looking for? Where are you offering your robotics program? Is it under Project Lead the Way, which is in, engineering and architecture? Or is it under information communication technology? Where do you have it? Because the person we credential for you may or may not qualify. So we need that information from you. And then when we're looking at their experience, hopefully they're a good match. Okay, one last warning on this issue. CTC subjects are not fully aligned with the CTE model curriculum standards that are determined by California Department of Ed. Example, animation. Animation is a good example because CTC has the job animator under manufacturing and product development. Well, CDE has animation under both arts, media, and entertainment and manufacturing and product development. And guess what? Most districts offer it under arts, media, and entertainment. So they're looking for somebody to have that on their credential. But if we don't know that, and if the individual's background only matches manufacturing and product development, then that's what they're going to get the credential in, and then you're going to have a big problem and won't be able to hire them. The closest occupation that CTC put for animation under arts, media, and entertainment is what they call multimedia production. So we'd be looking for that kind of experience to qualify them to put them under arts, media, and entertainment. Truly, the devil is in the details. There's my little devil. All right, how to qualify for a preliminary CTE credential. So how does one qualify for the credential? Well, the most important thing is work experience. They have to have industry work experience. I'm just checking my time there real quick. I've got about, I still have about 15. Yeah, good.
You're good. I'm keeping a tab on it for you.
Okay. So option 1, they need to have at least 3 years of related work experience in the industry. That's not teaching, that's industry experience, held a job in that industry. Now, CTC defines a year as 1,000 hours of paid or unpaid experience. It can be voluntary, doesn't have to be paid. So we would be looking for 3,000 hours. So let's say you want to hire a banking teacher. You're going to look for someone who has worked as a bank teller or some other job in a bank and in the banking industry to qualify. So that's the easy one. Well, let's say they don't have 3 years. Option 2 is, let's say they only have 2 years. They only have 2,000 hours of work experience. Well, what else do they have? Well, if they have 24 semester units of college courses in that subject, and so we'd be looking for banking, business, finance classes, then that could count as a year. Or if they have an industry certification in the subject, that could count for a year too. So that's how we get to that magical 3 years in option 2. Well, then there's option 3. Let's say you have an individual that you want to hire and they only have 1 year. Let's say they only have 1,000 hours of work experience. But if they have 48 semester units in the subject that they took, or if they have 24 semester units plus an industry certification, then there you go. That'll get them to those 3 years that we need. So there is another issue, and the issue is what's called recency. There is a recency requirement that CTC has on the work experience. Well, what's the reason? They don't want somebody to have work experience that's 40 years ago. That means they're not up to date in their industry, right? Probably not, unless they've done something else. But what CTC says is recency is at least 1 year, that's 1,000 hours of that work experience should have been within the last 5 years, or 2 years within the last 10 years. So they're looking for that individual to have worked in the industry recently. Well, there are a couple of ways to get around that, because this becomes a problem sometimes, because we have individuals who say, no, my work experience, was 20 years ago or something. Well, we can also look at what have they done to bring themselves up to date in the industry. So maybe they took post-secondary vocational training. Maybe they were in an occupational internship. Maybe they've done an industry certification, or maybe they have prior teaching experience because they did have a credential in a different subject and they've been teaching. So, we're looking at what we can do to meet that industry recency requirement. And those are some options there. All right, so once that individual gets their preliminary CTE credential, it's good for 3 years, which goes very quickly, because within that time, they have a lot of requirements they have to meet in order to clear their credential. And by the way, they need to apply for their clear credential at least 3 months before it expires. So that really only gives them about 2.5 years to get all these requirements done. So let's take a look. Well, within their first 30 days, we ask them to complete an early orientation, which is a free online training. It consists of 6 modules on the CTE online website. And then once they've done that, we have them start taking their professional preparation coursework, which is 4 or 5 courses, depending. We offer the courses online in partnership with the University of San Diego. So they're going to pay for 4 courses about $2,100 total, $600 each for the first 3 courses, and then another $350. They're going to get 10 semester units of credit, which is really great because they can use that on your salary schedule to advance, right? And those courses will cover a variety of topics, including classroom management, curriculum development, teaching English learners and students with special needs. Now, there's also a health education for teachers course that they will need to take unless they took an approved college level course. Then they need to have taught at least 1 CTE course for 4 semesters. Now that's after their preliminary CTE credential issuance date. So 4 semesters, which in most districts would be 2 school years of at least 1 CTE course. Also, they have to have 2 semesters of supervision, and the supervisor has to complete program evaluations and contact logs that are submitted to LACO. And again, the key person on this is the CTE administrator who does this. Additionally, the CTE administrator needs to assign a mentor teacher, preferably, although it could be a mentor administrator too, but that's a different person. You can't supervise and also mentor the teacher. And they also have to do 2 semesters of mentor observations once per semester, and then also a feedback log that tells us all of the other contacts they've had with the individual to assist them. The last thing is they have to complete a U.S. Constitution course or exam. Now, again, if they took a college course, they send us our transcripts and we'll let them know if we can waive it, if the course fits the U.S. Constitution requirements. And finally, sometime after the issuance date, they have to have had CPR certification for adults, children, and infants. It doesn't have to be valid when they clear their credential, as long as it was valid sometime after the prelim issuance date. Now, one last thing, If it appears that the individual will not have the 4 semesters of teaching and they won't have the 2 semesters of supervision and the 2 semesters of mentoring, there is another option. There's an additional course that they can take. It's called the Advanced Professional Training Course for CTE credentials. And then they could still clear their credential. So that would be their plan B. And that's the other reason we really recommend that they complete their requirements within those first 2 years, because if they are not able to meet these requirements, then there's still time for them to take that additional course in the 3rd year and still clear their credential on time. All right, so what other options do you have besides a designated subject CTE credential? Well, sometimes school districts have current teachers. They want to see if they're qualified. I just got an email from somebody today. Is this individual qualified to teach CTE? Well, if they have a single subject credential in a career technical subject, and these are the 5 that are approved, then they don't have to apply for a designated subject CTE credential. They can teach CTE for you. And what you see on the right side of the chart is for each of those industry sectors, which pathways are they allowed to teach underneath those? So, back to my robotics example, if somebody had a single subject credential in industrial technology education, they could teach robotics. They don't have to apply for a designated subject CTE credential. Now, there's not a lot of people with single subject CTE credentials. There used to be a lot, but there's not a lot of programs in the state, and so you don't see them all the time. But just know that as long as they have the appropriate career technical subject on their single subject credential, they can teach CTE. Just one disclaimer, in the California state plan, it says that in order to spend your Perkins funds, these teachers must be able to document some employment experience in the CTE industry sector. It doesn't say how much. This is something when they do Perkins reviews that they're going to look for, and they're going to ask you about that. So my recommendation is that you have this individual document some work experience or an industry certification or some post-secondary training, something that they have had in this subject that qualifies them. So hopefully, again, this is all about making sure they're up to date in the industry sector, that they've actually worked in the sector that they're credentialed in. Hopefully, they can do that. So what about a single subject teacher who does not have a career tech ed subject? Let's say they have a single subject in math. So it's not too difficult for us to qualify them, again, as long as they've had work experience in the subject. So let's say someone has a single subject math credential and you want them to teach robotics. They still have to have a minimum of 1 year of industry experience, paid or unpaid, in that industry. They have to have had 24 semester units in the subject listed, or an industry certification. And then they have to have taught full-time any subject for 1 year. So if you have a math teacher and they've been teaching math, you could qualify them for a designated subject CTE credential if they have at least a year of work experience and they have the 24 semester units of college courses related to the subject, or they have an industry certification. So it's relatively easy. The key, though, is that industry experience. Now, there is one other option, and I'm going to go back to the previous chart. If they can't qualify for the designated subject CTE credential, they might be able to do an add-on to their single subject credential for a supplementary CTE option. And so let's take industrial technology education. They could take the CSET exam in industrial technology education, pass the exam, and then what they would have to do is find a university, for instance, the university where they first took their single subject credential, and they would probably make them take one course, like a CTE methods course. And then they would apply for their add-on supplemental authorization to their single subject credential. It's complicated and we don't deal with that directly, but I'm glad to talk to you about it via email if you're in that situation, and help as much as I can. It's just another option if need be. Okay, so that concludes my presentation. This is our website where you can find our credential applications packet, frequently asked questions, and all kinds of good info, also how to get hold of us. Or you can just go to laco.edu/CTE and then click on the blue box that says credentials. And then this is my email. You can email me anytime, and that's really the best way to communicate about very, very specific questions. So I'll go quickly to the chat room.
And you have a solid 5 minutes.
Wow. Oh, cool. Great. Can the 3,000 hours be served in 2 years? Oh, good question. So you're looking at 1,500 hours per year. We usually get just the opposite. When they have fewer, can they spread it out? Can we accumulate them? Yes. You know, that's a gotcha for me. Maybe I'm having brain fade, but I'm not sure. I think so. Laura, I know your email. I can get the answer to that and email it to you. I can't think of a situation where I've had that. I think you're still going to have to come up with something in that 3rd year, maybe some college courses, maybe an industry certification, but count that as, 2,000 hours instead.
When you're
question.
looking at people that have served in public service, like firemen or policemen or paramedics that work, 48-hour shifts.
Yeah, got it. But they've only worked for say 2 years.
Right.
Laura, I don't know if I'm having brain fade, but you got me stumped. So I'd like to double check with Linda on that.
No,
you an email.
It's just a question, but I appreciate you considering it. Thank you.
It's a great question. And at the moment, I just can't remember. So I will get that answer to you. Sorry about that.
No problem.
I rarely get stumped with credential questions. Yeah. Anybody else? You can unmute if you would like to ask a question. I think we got a pretty small group here. Yeah.
I wondered if you had any inroads to groups of CTE credential holders that obviously, well, bottom line is it's very difficult to find like construction CTE credential holders. Is there a secret society or group that I don't know about where I could try to find them? Or I just wondered if you had any tips and where to find these people. Yeah,
I do. I have a couple of tips.
Great,
one is many of them belong to the organization CITEA, the California Instructors of Technology Education, CITEA, whatever association I think it is. A lot of building construction teachers belong to CITEA. They may even have a method to post jobs or send out notices for you across the state. So I would check there, and they have conferences and webinars and so forth. I guess the other secret would be there are apprenticeship programs across the state. Here in LA County, LACO actually works directly with like the Electrical Training Institute, the sheet metal workers, communication workers, and the plumbers and some of the others. And actually on our website under apprenticeship programs, under our CTE website, there's contacts. I think there's emails. I'm not sure if there's phone numbers or not, but if you wanted to get hold of a particular one, you can email me and I'll get that to you. Many of those apprentices, they mostly teach then, they get credentialed through us, but then they're teaching their own workers. So the veteran workers, like the Electrical Training Institute, they get credentialed and then they become an instructor there at the apprenticeship site. But I've known one or two.
And
that
Dr.
have
Wagner,
actually
it's
taught
about to
for
close.
districts. Okay, they've taught for districts too. Now, the third thing is email us your flyer. We'll send it out to everybody in our database who has a building construction trades credential. Okay, so just email me and we can talk some more. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.